So when my dad went DOD, so he was a firefighter on an air base. So we spent a lot of time on the base. So we kind of got to see like the pilots, like C-130s and heavies, went to air shows and stuff like that. So it was always pretty neat to see that. And then every now and then you would see the uniform, and so that became a big part of. I was like, that looks exciting, but I don't know if that's what I want to do yet.
Yeah.
And so as I got older, when I graduated high school, I wanted to go to college for a little bit and go in as a officer, but at the same time, I didn't want to stay in the town we grew up in because it was really small. So I
Yeah.
was like, I need to be places. My mom and dad were always like, you either go to college or you go to the military, but you can't stay here. So
Yeah. So that kind of, encouraged you to get out and
yes.
get somewhere.
I think the biggest influence was when my sister joined,
Which
when
one?
Zelina left.
Yeah.
Zelina. Yeah. I remember when she left, I was actually mad at her for leaving. And I didn't understand why at that point. I just knew like I spent most of my time with her.
Right.
And um, so when she left, I took it personal.
Yeah.
And then 9/11 happened. And to get all the letters from her, and when they activated her unit and the security went from, oh, you could just drive on the base with your ID card,
Hmm.
to we're going to search your vehicle.
Yeah.
And
It
it
was a
just like
huge
heightened.
transition.
Yeah. So I was like, oh man. And she used to tell me in her letters, don't join, keep going to school, don't join. And I was like, I'm going to join.
Why not?
Oh, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was always pretty neat to see all the different aircrafts and um, the stunt pilots, like the Thunderbirds,
Yes.
and the Blue Angels. And then it does, those aircrafts didn't have quite the impact as as a kid as they do now, because my husband's a pilot. And so now, like, I'm like, oh man, I never thought like all that would happen. And so it's just weird where I'm like, I just grew up around airplanes and now I'm married to a pilot.
Yeah, it's weird the way things work out sometimes.
Yes.
You-
I grew up in Ohio. It'll
yeah.
always be home. Um, but 2 years ago, my grandfather passed away. And so when I left for the military, my parents moved. And so when I was deployed, they were in a new house. And then when I got back, they were in a different house.
Yeah.
And so they had moved three to five times in my time frame in the military. And so I never went back to that house after graduation. So I call my grandpa and grandma's house home. We actually just bought their home. And um, so it stays in the family because that's more like the home feel than
Hmm.
going to their house now. And it's just because it hasn't been a permanent in my life, but my
Yeah.
hometown will always be Southington.
Yeah. It's such a hard, you know, thing to ask is where's home,
Yeah.
especially as a military child, I've had the experience of moving, and then since you were in yourself and you've experienced many different places, it's hard to pick one location and say, okay, this is home. This is
Yeah.
where I call home. And there's so many different places that have such an impact on your life that they each have a piece of you that you have to
Yeah.
pick then and say, hey, this is
Absolutely.
home.
The generic answer is wherever they put me.
Yeah.
Oh, one experience I remember, Zelina and James, when I just got back from probably a TDY or something, and Zelina was like, "Hey, I'm coming back to Bragg. I'll be there for a little bit." So I met her at what they call their chow hall. And in the Air Force, they clean up after you in the DFAC. So I got up and I left my tray, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Don't they clean this up?" She was like, "No." She's like, "God, you're still a baby." And I'm like, I was like, "Not my fault you joined the army. They clean my plate."
The two
Yeah,
branches
it's
are
funny.
so different. I
They
mean,
are.
even between
They are.
all the different branches that we have, they're so different. And
Yeah.
yeah, just as simple as cleaning up after yourself. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's so, so different than I grew up Army. So you clean up after yourself. So,
Exactly. Because that's what she did growing up. She would always pretty much be like, "Mom said clear the table," so she would have to like do the big chores. And so
yeah.
that was her first comment. "You're still such a baby." I was like, "What? I didn't make these rules."
Yeah, because I remember going to the unit even before dad deployed, and we'd go to the unit, and I think there were a couple days that we had a meal there and we had to clean up after ourselves. And then when we started living with Lina for a little bit, she was like, always make sure clean up after yourself, because that's the way she had always known it.
Yeah. And Linus just like she's pretty serious. I'd probably let them make that decision on their own.
Yeah.
Um, so now they both grow up around it quite a bit. Xavier more so than our youngest Walter, um, because I was still in when Xavier was born, so he remembers going to work with me, which is kind
Yeah.
of funny because he was an infant and he'll be like, "Remember when I used to go to your work?" And I was like, "How do you? There's no way you can remember that."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, we would go in," and he would explain like my office, and so I was just like, "Oh wow, okay, you really remember." And like he doesn't remember the whole thing, but
Yeah.
he will have like little phases where he's like, "Hey," and I'm like, "There's no year, that was like 4 years ago."
How
How
do
do
you
you
even
and
remember that?
yeah, and he's about to be 6. So and he's gone through deployments with his dad. Even when he was born, his dad and I were separated. We were at different bases, where I was in Ohio and he was in Korea. So for that whole first year, Xavier did not get that, other than he knew dad was at work.
Yeah.
And so, but Walter just knows, oh, daddy went to work. Where this deployment coming up, he'll probably recognize more that daddy's not around. But we're due with our third in like 7 weeks. So she'll have like no idea until,
Yeah.
like
It'll
there's
take a
another
couple
one.
years.
Yeah. So it's crazy to see the differences where Xavier mentally now is like, okay, I know daddy has to leave again. And
Hmm.
Walter's like, hmm, sure, daddy's gonna leave, but I know he, because of technology, he can still talk to him.
Yeah.
And then she won't even know. She'll just, he'll come home and be like, "Hey, look, here's your baby."